kickstart. First of all, I'm Antoinette Cha. I'm the CEO of Advanced Diversity Services. And good morning, everyone. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge we are hosting this event from the land of Eora Nation. And I also acknowledge the traditional custody of the various land on which you are all work or study today, and I pay my respect to the elder past, present, and emerging. At ADS, we always want to build an inclusive organization, and I am so pleased to share with you that in the past few years, we have been awarded as Gold Service Provider twice and a Silver Service Provider with the Australian Pride in Health and Wellbeing Award. However, we know we are not experts. We know there is room for us to improve, and therefore we approached University of Wollongong for a research study to better understand the knowledge, the skill, the attitude of our staff, and identify gaps so that we would improve our work with LGBT community. So thank you to Dr. Kwan Yi-Ling and her research team. You have devoted much effort and make invaluable contribution to the research, and are deeply grateful for your contribution. And also, I would like to thank you for all ADS staff and volunteers who participate in the research study. In particular, Anthony and Michael, who have been helped a lot with the research study. Today is also International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Together, let's stand out against discrimination and support the LGBT community. And now I would like to invite Dr. Kwan to formally launch and present the research report. Dr. Kwan is a queer migrant woman herself, and she currently works as senior lecturer at the sociology at University of Wollongong. She is also the chair of the University Alliance Network, a network that supports students and staff who are gender, sexual, and sexuality diverse people. Okay, let's welcome, I used to call her Yi-Ling, I want to call her Dr. Kwan. So welcome, Yi-Ling.
Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to share screen with everyone. Yeah, okay. Are you able to see my screen? Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll start. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I wish to acknowledge that the land we're meeting today remains stolen and occupied, and Indigenous sovereignty was never ceded. I wish to acknowledge my privilege and complicity as a migrant contributing to and reaping benefits from a settler colonial system that continues to perpetuate injustices and inequalities against Indigenous peoples. Excuse me. I would like to pay my respect to the elders past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the culture, and hopes of Indigenous Australia. I would also like to extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are present here today. So in June 2020, Advanced Diversity Services approached the University of Wollongong with a particular community-based research need. In the context of global pandemic, ADS, like other community organizations, observes that the vulnerability of queer communities, particularly culturally and linguistically diverse queer communities, has deepened. It is therefore a pressing priority for multicultural diversity service organizations like ADS to extend their supportive services to queer communities who are impacted by multiple and intersecting dominant systems, oppressive systems such as racism, queerphobia, xenophobia, gender discrimination, and Islamophobia, and up to recently COVID-related anti-Asian hate. So naturally, in this current context, they are made more vulnerable as a result of COVID-19. However, ADS has also observed that LGBTQIA+ people hesitated to approach multicultural community organizations for support, as they might feel unsure about the level of acceptance towards them among multicultural local and migrant communities, and might not feel that the services provided would be hospitable and sensitive to their needs. ADS suggested that queer people might tend to turn to mainstream queer community organizations for supportive services, but may not be able to receive culturally and linguistically specific and sensitive services. ADS expressed their hopes to extend outreach efforts to this social group in South Sydney region. Now, to do so, ADS acknowledged that they will first need to understand social attitudes, knowledge and skills of their diversity service workers and identify existing gaps. Only when they have gained a more in-depth understanding of their capabilities and limitations, they will then be able to develop effective diversity staff training and appropriate community outreach strategies targeting multicultural queer communities in the local government areas they serve. So the conceptualization of this community engagement research project was based on this particular research need identified by ADS. So it's a ground-up approach. Also to clarify that the project uses the reference queer as an umbrella term to refer to individuals self-identifying as gender, sex, and sexuality diverse from dominant gender, sex, and sexuality systems and norms, and they include of course, not limited to this group of people. So they include such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-conforming, non-binary, asexual, and intersex. Now, the use of queer reference is also in line with Eve Seshwick's conceptualization of queering as interrogating and reconsidering what we assume as normal, natural, and appropriate. So there is there's activism involved in using the word queer here, but it is not also, we are also not confined to just this term, but we're using it as an umbrella term to refer to anyone that is self-identifying as gender, sex, and sexuality diverse from dominant systems, dominant binary systems and norms. So, informed by existing literature, the study paid particular attention to diversity service workers' three areas: their attitude, which is the management of their personal reactions, beliefs, assumptions, and prejudice. We also look at knowledge in terms of terminology, information, and language. And we look at skills, which refers to interpersonal rapport building, cultural intelligence, and service and program delivery. Here, the research would add to the existing literature by investigating the specific attitudes and knowledge and skills gap of diversity service workers in their provision of health, social, and care services to multicultural queer people and communities. Through a range of data collection methods, the project set out to investigate these two specific areas. One is to look at diversity service workers' attitudes and concerns towards ADS plan to provide support services to multicultural queer communities. And we also look at their knowledge and skills gap in delivering community outreach initiatives and services to queer communities. The study employed a mixed method research design that comprised a survey, focus group discussions, and interviews. The research team recruited ADS staff members and volunteers. In stage one, the voluntary survey targeted ADS staff members and long-term volunteers to provide an overview of their overall levels of acceptance, knowledge, and skills in servicing queer communities. The study received 35 responses. There was a response rate of 30%. In stage two, the research team recruited 7 ADS managerial staff, including the CEO, and carried out one-on-one confidential interviews with them. The interview focused on the manager's views on ADS staff's general attitudes towards LGBTQIA+ people, knowledge of queer people, anticipated skills gap in servicing queer people, and their views on extending current service delivery to multicultural queer people. In stage 3, the research team recruited 16 participants and carried out 4 focus group discussions virtually via Zoom. Each focus group consisted of 2 to 6 participants from a variety of service areas, including settlement and community services, corporate and administrative services, age and disability services, and management. The sample included long-term volunteer board members, volunteers who have worked in different areas, administrative staff, and direct service case workers. The participants discussed anticipated skills gap in servicing queer individuals and brainstormed for specific diversity and inclusion training and skills development ideas to meet the skills needs relevant to their specific work areas. I'll jump right into the discussion and recommendations. The project is by far the first study to investigate into diversity service workers' level of acceptance, knowledge, and skills gaps as they extend their service beyond local and migrant populations to include a specific social group, which is in this case, local and migrant, multicultural, gender, sex, and sexuality people, diverse people. It first acknowledges limitations in achieving a higher participant response rate. It accepts the possible criticism that the findings may skew towards a more positive note, since those who responded to the recruitment call were likely to be more agreeable and supportive of their employer, extending services to gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people, and actively reaching out to queer communities. Having said that, there is significant value in considering this project's findings on diversity service workers' sentiments, attitudes, and questions on servicing queer clients, as the findings will enhance the preparation of the caring workforce before and during outreach efforts and service delivery. Overall, the respondents, including board members, leadership team, direct service workers, administrative staff, and long-term volunteers, expressed overwhelming support for ADS to target their outreach efforts at queer clients and promote the organization as a queer-friendly community service provider. The general sentiment was one of pride and agreement, especially since the organization is in the caring industry and the employees are part of the caring workforce. Some respondents also listed the significant achievement ADS has achieved, such as winning gold awards for Health and Wellbeing Equality Index for 2 consecutive years in 2019 and 2020, improving internal and client-facing processes to be more LGBTQIA+ inclusive, leading the production of multicultural LGBTQIA+ support directory, and getting staff trained in inclusive practices and participating in pride events. There was also a culturally sensitive and respectful sentiment that ADS was not attempting to impose dominant Western-centric understandings and expressions of gender, sex, and sexuality, but simply availing themselves as a queer, hospitable service provider for multicultural queer individuals seeking for aged care, disability care, settlement services, and mental health support. So these are some of the quotes from the focus group discussions and from the interviews about how they generally feel. And these are just some of the quotes. And if you are interested to know more, the report has a more detailed explanation and evaluation of the positive attitudes and sense of pride among the respondents. While there has not been adverse reactions or explicit objection by staff members, according to the study's participants, it was observed that there was initial hesitation due to personal cultural beliefs, which is quite expected. So some of the quotes included, for example, that they work with very religious people, and even among their families, they could be religious, or they could have their own cultural belief, and they may not feel comfortable, and there may be questions initially. But generally, I think that what the participants have conveyed is that their colleagues, their staff members who might have expressed initial hesitation due to their own personal cultural beliefs, but they also understand that they will work according to the professional standards, the service delivery standards, and they will continue to they'll be willing to continue to demonstrate eagerness to deliver their service to their clients, regardless of whether they are queer or not. And they also agreed in the fact that there has been a very consultative process throughout this change in terms of extending their service to multicultural queer communities. Now, some respondents also reviewed there was a less common sentiment on the ground. For example, questions around about this emphasis on gender, sex, and sexuality. So some of the quotes included like, I haven't heard very bad comments, but just, why is it that we're giving so much importance to LGBTQI plus community? Why do we have to treat them in a special way? Why are we doing this training again? Now, they clarified that this frequent emphasis on this group of people based on their gender, sex, and sexuality only set them apart and reinforced the exclusion process instead of meeting the intended purpose of integrating and including them. Now, that's a valid point because balancing between creating awareness of real and existing discrimination against queer people, against LGBTQIA plus people, and avoid singling them out all the time and emphasizing their non-normative differences and reinforcing their minority status is not an easy thing to do, right? So striking the balance is a challenge, but these are all very important and valid points for all of us to consider as we advocate anti-discrimination, as we advocate for gender, sex, and sexuality, equity, and justice. How do we then avoid reinforcing, minoritizing them, or how do we avoid, keep emphasizing that they are non-normative? So this is an interesting interesting point for us to consider as we move forward into our research and community work. So when asked about the level of knowledge of gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as queer communities, the majority of the respondents would commonly indicate that they possess a good knowledge as they have attended several LGBTQI plus training programs that their employer has provided. However, the research team gathered from data collected through the survey, interviews, and focus group discussion that the sample at times still display a bit of confusion of the following areas. One is confusion between the concepts of gender, sex, and sexuality. For example, when asked what the respondent's sexuality was, they would answer female, male, cisgender. When asked about their gender, they answer straight and heterosexual. They have also demonstrated lack of adequate knowledge of less known gender, sex, and sexuality expressions such as asexual, pansexual, non-binary, transgender, and intersex, people with intersex, sex variations. At times, there was still inappropriate language used when discussing gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people, for example, referring to heterosexual people as normal, and hence revealing an underlying perception that non-heterosexual people are not normal. There also were some reservations about children and young people self-identifying gender, sex, and sexuality diverse among several survey respondents, as they believe that these children and young people are merely going through a developmental phase. Now, these are important findings for us to consider. It's not meant to demonstrate any form of criticism, but it is really to help us see what are the areas of gaps that we for organizations and including advocates as well as service providers and even researchers on the ground to think about as we move forward with these findings. Now, they identify some important training areas that they would think that would be helpful for them. So one of them is building and cultivating trusting relationships and rapport with queer clients. For example, while attempting to build rapport with them, how do we protect their privacy as well? How do we protect their need to, to keep certain matters private? How do we create safe queer spaces to make queer clients feel welcome and safe to interact with diversity service workers? How do we create safe queer spaces to make multicultural queer clients feel welcome and safe to interact with other multicultural communities? How do we integrate queer clients with the rest of the client base and manage the group dynamics for a safe and respectful environment? And they also talk about hoping to understand more, to gain a more in-depth knowledge of care needs and healthcare and social issues confronting gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people. So these are, again, really interesting knowledge and skills gaps for us to consider as we think of whether it's staff training or whether it is community engagement, whether it is also service delivery. Now, the respondents were well aware of the varying degrees of stigmatization and discrimination against gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people across the various multicultural migrant communities they serve. So some respondents expressed that some members, some people that they know, some community members have immigrated out of their home country at a time when there was no language describing multiple gender, sexualities, and sexes, even though their home countries might have by now embraced a system of multiple gender, sex, and sexuality, and related vernacular has been widely circulated and used in the everyday life. The immigrants who have left their home country decades ago might not have caught up with the developments back home. So they regarded, many might still regard the celebration of queerness or multiple forms of family in their host country, in this case, Australia, as a Western liberal lifestyle that is not of their traditional conservative cultures. So the rejection of homosexuality and queer people is reduced to and justified as a cultural belief and practice. Now, so overcoming and correcting some of these misconceptions and bring light to the colonial construct of homophobia and criminalization of homosexuality will then require considerable and very careful efforts. So one of the things that was also mentioned in the interviews and focus group discussion is that some respondents also mentioned that it was a taboo speaking about sexuality and sexual relations openly with their clients. These matters were considered private and personal affairs, and their clients might not feel comfortable discussing with the service providers. The respondents were especially unconfident that the elderly multicultural clients would be willing to disclose their sexuality or any matter concerning their sexual identities and relations. They might feel annoyed and did not feel that the service workers had any business prying into their personal affairs in order for them to receive ADS services, or did not understand what the service providers were asking. So one respondent aptly put across this to us that I'm not sure if they resonate with people of cult backgrounds, because asking for pronouns is very Western-centric. The rainbow flags, I don't know if it is a global thing or if it's a Western symbol. I think it's really important because a lot of people of cult backgrounds who think that, you know, my sexuality and my gender are very personal. Why do I need to share these? I'm only here to get financial support or to get some information about enrolling my child. Why is that even relevant? So this is really interesting for us to approach this idea of providing services, because as we receive a lot of training from mainstream queer organizations, we would also appreciate that that there's no one-size-fits-all kind of model to think about gender, sex, and sexuality, especially among multicultural organizations, language groups, religious groups. Their understanding, their meanings, the systems of gender, sex, and sexuality could really vary very, very significantly, not just across the groups, but also within the groups and intergenerationally as well. So these are just really important findings for us to consider. So what is then needed in this space is, as discussed and proposed by the respondents, is intergenerational knowledge on specific cultural and religious meaning systems, languages, norms, practices, and taboos regarding gender, sex, and sexuality across and within multicultural and multi-language groups ADS works with in the South Sydney region. Intersectional, multicultural, intergenerational understanding and approach of care needs and social issues of culturally and linguistically diverse queer people, especially in the context of pandemic response and recovery, is very much needed in this space. Training in acquiring skills to approach the topic of gender, sex, and sexuality with diverse cultural and language groups to make queer clients, especially elderly clients, feel safe, and also customizing the communication methods and services accordingly. Even important skills, how to establish rapport and trust and a working relationship with existing multicultural community leaders, and so that we can work together and extend ADS community outreach programs to multicultural, gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people. There have been also some other suggestions being brought up on outreach strategies. One is to enhance the visibility of ADS as a queer, hospitable organization. Will send a strong signal of safety and care to queer communities, including CULT queer communities. The study's respondents suggested organizing more public and community outreach events in partnership with local councils, community organizations, and queer groups to enhance visibility of ADS capacities to serve queer communities, especially CULT queer people. Rainbow emblems, pronouns, and information on ADS commitment to supporting queer communities could also be included in the organization's website, posters, pamphlets, information pack for clients, recruitment advertisements, presentation templates, and email signatures. Social media is an effective publicity tool, as brought up by one of a few respondents, putting up posts and tweets with strong messaging such as ADS is not just CULT friendly, but also CULT queer friendly, and engaging CULT queer and non-queer social media influencers to raise the organization's queer hospitable profile among local communities. Members of the public, partners, and clients were also suggested in the study. Now, it has also been suggested that ADS could forge a closer working relationship with local multicultural community leaders to advocate for gender, sex, and sexuality diversity and equity. Now, to begin, as I mentioned earlier, that a more in-depth knowledge and systems of gender, sex, and sexuality and family across multiple cultural and language groups is necessary to not just increase cultural literacy and capabilities, but more importantly, to address misconceptions and dispel stereotypes. Joint training sessions and education forums with community leaders and ADS diversity service workers will be helpful to hold conversations on gender, sex, and sexuality. An example of foreign topic brought up during the focus group discussion was looking at the religion Hinduism, understanding multiple genders and sexualities through Hindu gods and goddesses, and a few other interesting conversation topics also came up were suggested for community forum topics. Respondents have also proposed more conversation platforms with multicultural and multi-faith community leaders and members, where multicultural queer people could share lived experiences on relationship with family and local ethnic and religious communities and other barriers in their everyday life. Specific networking sessions targeting elderly community leaders and members could also be organized to hear their thoughts and invite queer-friendly elderly parents to share experiences parenting and queer children and supporting their sexuality or their gender, sex, and sexuality diversity. However, the research team notes that for these open, meaningful conversations with local community leaders and members to take place, trust and rapport will need to be established with them first. It is therefore important to find appropriate queer-friendly facilitators or gatekeepers among local multicultural communities so as to gain a pathway to the communities and initiate conversations to understand ground sentiments and issues concerning gender, sex, and sexuality. Now, the engagement of local gatekeepers and facilitators, such as community leaders, elders, youth leaders, and social media influencers as co-facilitators or subsequent open forums at grassroots level is key in bringing about community-focused conversations and promoting trust and support with local multicultural communities. The research team recommends tapping on community leaders' insights to generate more effective outreach strategies that will help current and potential clients to feel safe in disclosing sexuality and gender needs and make full use of ADS services. Another suggested outreach strategy includes partnering with other community organizations across various sectors, especially queer organizations. Queer organizations, if they're made aware of ADS services and its queer hospitality and literacy, could refer their queer clients to ADS for specific aged care, disability care, and settlement services. It's also been recommended that ADS could publicize its queer-friendly services to community organizations from various sectors and let them know that they could refer queer clients to ADS for its aged care, disability care, and settlement services. Now, many respondents expressed not having actual work experience servicing multicultural queer clients and suggested having hands-on internship work experience and mentoring programs with other queer organizations who work with multicultural queer groups. So what is the next step for us after this pilot project? So the primary objective of this project is really to understand the attitudes, the concerns, and knowledge and skills gaps of ADS diversity service workers regarding providing existing healthcare and settlement services to queer individuals. So using these research findings generated from this pilot study, we hope that the project hopes that the ADS will be able to develop an appropriate staff training strategy and effective communication outreach initiatives to support multicultural, gender, sex, and sexuality diverse people, especially in the context of COVID-19 response and recovery. Now, it is also hoped that this pilot project has provided some timely, practical, and useful research findings to benefit the wider multicultural community service sector through dissemination of project findings and showcasing, follow-up community outreach strategies and training strategies carried out by ADS. ADS will then be able to serve as a case study or model to encourage other multicultural community organizations and migrant resource centers to extend their client base and outreach to multicultural, gender, sex, and sexuality diverse communities in the local government areas they serve. Primarily, also more importantly, what the project hopes to have achieved is to raise the profile of multicultural organizations like ADS as queer hospitable service providers. Now, well-trained and compassionate diversity service workers are eager to extend their mainstream services in disability care and aged care and settlement services to queer individuals, especially multicultural queer people. So this completed project opens the pathway for a more extensive research study to follow up, we hope that the broader study that we plan to implement will aim to address the next level of needs that ADS has identified, which is to investigate the specific everyday care needs and practices in the areas of livelihood, settlement, health and well-being, age and disability care, and also social connections of multicultural queer communities in the local government areas, especially in the context of global pandemic response and recovery. We also hope that the broader study that's going to follow up after this pilot project will continue to further knowledge building capacity on diverse and multiple cultural meanings of gender, sex, and sexuality. Now, as we can see from this project, this area is very much needed because we can't insist and impose on this mainstream Western-centric understanding of gender, sex, and sexuality, including some very important notions of coming out and the use of pronouns and other very important advocacy work. So it's not to disregard this advocacy work, it's not to disregard these important agendas, but then to also be mindful, not imposing the one-size-fits-all Western-centric systems of gender, sex, and sexuality on multicultural communities. How then do we move forward to support multicultural queer people? And the very important step to move forward is to build up our knowledge on multiple and diverse cultural systems, meanings of gender, sex, and sexuality, to not just increase our appreciation of the multiplicity of gender, sex, and sexuality, but also to allow multicultural communities to appreciate their own systems of there are multiple systems of gender, sex, and sexuality. So it goes both ways, and this area is very much needed in this for us for community outreach strategy to be effective and for service delivery to be appropriate and to be culturally sensitive. So that's one of the main things that really came out from this pilot project and that is very much needed in the broader study. And working with local community leaders where, community leaders could be roped in to not just be the facilitator, but to also express some of the local concerns, the taboos, as well as the questions they might have is really key, that partnership with community leaders in this specific area. And to help the community leaders to also understand that when gender, sex, and sexuality diversity is being promoted, it is not just to impose this Western-centric understanding of gender, sex, and sexuality and making, people all come out, or to make people all have to use a certain pronouns, or to make people to have to follow certain kind of dominant practices. So that kind of collaborative and trusting relationship really needs to come forth and to really respect the multicultural positions on gender, sex, and sexuality. So to engage and foster that collaborative relationship is very much needed. And so this follow-up project will examine, will hope to investigate further in terms of community leaders. It also hopes to examine the specific reason why multicultural queer communities would or would not turn to multicultural organizations for supportive resources, and also to understand what are the kind of care services and care needs that they would have. And the strategies that multicultural organizations like ADS could employ to reach out to this specific group, to this social group. So the broader project will help them to further promote the visibility and availability of multicultural queer care services that ADS and other community organizations provide for multicultural queer communities. So this is really the end of my sharing. I also want to just acknowledge ADS for its community partnership and overwhelming support. The project couldn't have been completed without ADS support and endorsement. And we thank every participant, the survey participants, the 35 survey participants, including the in-depth one-on-one interview participants and the focus group discussions, the participants of the 4 focus group discussions. Thank you for your time and your input at all these 3 stages of the research data collection. We recognize that this is still just a pilot study and that there's a lot more need to be done and there's a lot more research that could be advanced. We appreciate your time for helping us make that first step possible. We also like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to ADS Chief Executive Officer Antoinette Chow, ADS Settlement and Community Services Manager Anthony Suri, and ADS Corporate Services Manager Michael Chong for rendering so much support to the research team throughout the project. We also like to acknowledge the research funding provided by University of Wollongong Community Engagement Grant that enables its successful execution and completion, and to thank UOW Community Engagement Team for their assistance, and a special acknowledgement for the project research team, Dr. Jan Filmer, who is here today, and Dr. Alexandra Ridgway for their significant contributions to the project. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you very much for the very detailed explanation about the process and the outcome of the research. We're really looking forward to our next step and work with other people. And also aware that Dr. John Film is here. Thank you very much. John is also one of the research team. You just put your hand up?
Yes, hi.
Would you like to say something?
Oh, just, I guess I can reiterate some of Eling's thanks to the team and to everyone involved. Yeah, we really appreciate also the facilitation of Michael and you, Antoinette, and Anthony in doing this project with ADS. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I know you probably have a lot of questions you want to ask Elaine. Can you just hold it until our Q&A session? And I would like to also invite our second speaker, Kim Walk. Kim is the manager from the Community Partnership, Peer Education and Population Program from ACON. And he will talk about diversity and inclusion. Thank you, Tim.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
And is the PowerPoint working? Yep. Excellent, thank you. So my name is Tim Walk. I'm the Manager of Community Partnerships and Population Programs at ACON. And always, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I am today, and that's the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So today is International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. So thank you to ADS and Dr. Ealing and her team for this report, as it really provides a number of practical steps to support the broader LGBTQ multicultural communities and LGBTQ people within those communities. So ADS is a member of Pride in Health and Wellbeing and has been for the last 3 years. So I'm here today to really build on Dr. Ealing's report and to celebrate the ways in which ADS has already been working around diversity and inclusion for sexuality and gender diverse communities over the last 3 years. So each year ADS participates in the Health and Wellbeing Equality Index. This index measures the diversity and inclusion initiatives across several categories and benchmarks them against other service providers. So in 2019, ADS was a gold tier recipient, and in 2020, ADS was also a gold tier recipient and was awarded the Service Provider of the Year. Now, 2022 represented a new iteration of the Health and Wellbeing Equality Index, which means we adjusted our baseline scores to the new marking format by comparing and improving our benchmarking index to ensure that we are aligning with the best practice and quality improving principles, both nationally and internationally. In doing so, each year we actually raise the expectation for what LGBTQ inclusive care looks like. This means scores didn't automatically increase from the year before. So in this way, we ensure equity and still highlight the best practice in the field. So just for kind of a breakdown, the top 10% fall into gold, the next 10% silver, and bronze the following 20%. So ADS is a silver recipient this year. So just for context, silver rose by 5%, but what this represents is a significant amount of work across client, patient and service user frameworks. It really shows a significant work around LGBTQ inclusion. And I really want to reiterate that this is not a drop in LGBTQ inclusion. Instead, it's just showing how the benchmark gets higher and higher each year, and ADS is really keeping up with that pace, which is pretty phenomenal. So, as many of you would know, LGBTQ people experience poorer health and mental health outcomes and poorer access to health services. Now, this is often due to a lack of cultural safety in relation to gender and sexuality. Over the last 3 years, ADS has done a significant amount of work to become more LGBTQ inclusive. So what I thought I would do is actually just go through some of the ways that, can you see the screen sharing thing? Well, I don't know what to do about that. I'm just gonna move it out of the way. So, what I thought I would do is actually align some of the ways in which ADS has already been working on a number of the recommendations within Dr. Ealing's report. So ADS was successful in receiving funding to train 81 staff through ACON's inclusive practice training. ADS also established an LGBTIQA+ working group, and that working group provides supports local organisations to improve access and equity for LGBTQ clients. Also, ADS partnered with the University of Wollongong to do this report. Oh, why is this not working? Now, the main area I really wanted to focus on was outreach strategies and the sheer amount of work ADS has done in this space. So the 3 recommendations within the report are building corporate reputation, working with local community leaders, and partnering with organisations across the sector. Now, ADS has done a lot of work in terms of building its corporate reputation. It's become a member of the Welcome Here project, which supports businesses and organisations throughout Australia to create and promote environments that are visibly welcoming and inclusive of LGBTQ communities. Now, importantly, Welcome Here is a way to visibly demonstrate that you are inclusive. And I would note that within Dr. Eling's presentation, there was a question around whether or not the rainbow flag would actually be a symbol for multicultural or COL communities understanding inclusion. So one thing we know from our work is that the rainbow flag is an international symbol that actually kind of speaks across cultures. And that's because we have pride and things like that in many of the countries around the world. So this is actually kind of a shorthand way to show inclusion. So the other thing ADS has done is participated in a number of specifically queer events or LGBTQ events, whether that's been through the Fair Day stalls in 2020, partnering with Queer Screen for the Goodbye Mother film, sorry. So, I'm missing one here. The other thing ADS has done is partner with local community leaders. So one area in which this was great to see was Pride in My Faith, a video which offers insights into the struggles faced by LGBTQ people of faith from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and really understanding how to reconcile their faith, their culture, and their queer identity. Now, this work is quite important when we think about LGBTQ communities within Australia, which have often had difficult relationships with religion. So one thing we see within the broader LGBTQ communities is actually some discrimination towards people of faith. So this type of work really highlights, what can be done when we work with local leaders and to build ADS as a safe and inclusive space. Next has been supporting GLSEN and a number of other steering committees. And lastly, I wanted to use this as a partnering with community organisations across sectors. So a really interesting kind of tidbit I pulled out from the report was that COL queer people would hesitate to go to multicultural services such as ADS, but then by the same token, if they go to community organisations such as ACON in my case, they might not get culturally and linguistically sensitive services. Now, this is a really important point. So where ADS is looking to improve its LGBTQ diversity and inclusion, ACON's actually looking to improve its multicultural inclusion. And we've actually developed a multicultural engagement plan to do that. But what this directory that I believe is led by Anthony shows is, what it shows is what we can achieve when we actually come together and partner with each other. So initially this project was done by ADS, and then in its second iteration, ACON got on board through partnering with ADS, and now we actually take a partnership approach to ensure that this support directory is updated each year. We tap into both our expertise around LGBTQ, ADS's expertise around multicultural. And for me, this is kind of one of the long-term solutions to providing services in this space. It's actually coming together and working in partnership. And what we've actually done on top of this is built this into an online resource called Rainbow Cultures. So this resource now exists as a website, which we continually update each year whenever the support directory is updated. I have put Claire Allen's details here, as she's the National Program Manager for Pride in Health and Wellbeing. But for me, it's really important that we actually celebrate all of the initiatives ADS has done in quite a short period of time. And that's everything from me.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We did receive a lot of support along our journey become an inclusive organization from ACON. I had to say it's not easy for a multicultural organization like us to try to break the barrier and to try to get support from our multicultural community and multi-religion community. And a couple of things we probably have implemented since the last research report. We know that a lot of people, a lot of Khmer community not come to multicultural organization because there are not a really, there's not many multicultural organizations actually LGBT inclusive. So people actually, who are you, you know? So we will still try work really hard to get the trust from the community. Last year we did some art classes as a soft entry point, so people feel, okay, I'm not, you know, giving a lot of my information. I'm just only come for a few art classes. And luckily, we also get the second round of funding to do more art class in the coming week. So the art class is not run by our art teacher, who also from the LGBTI background. We, through each art class, we provide some information about the community service as well. Then the other thing we are trying really hard, I don't know, anyone attending to them may give us some support. We try to create interagency. I mean that you will heard a lot multicultural service interagency, child and family interagency, but in our area there's no interagency, no network really for to work together for LGBTI, and we try to work with council to try to get some support from council, and also work with local organizations to establish a new network. So is anyone interested? We are not only looking for money, but we're also looking for people to join the interagency. So now I'll probably move to our Q&A session. If people have any questions, please feel free to either put on the chat or use the reaction to raise your hand. Anyone want to go to the first question first? I may ask the first one. Our experience, we found that, and I think from the research, we also talk about that during some religion or culture, a lot of people actually even not talk about LGBTI. It's a topic, you know, they try to avoid. How we were able to support staff or volunteer to feel comfortable to talk about it without feeling this, you know, without feeling stressed when they actually maybe share some message with the family or the community people. I think other team who had more experience, or Yiling maybe give some suggestion.
Yiling, did you want to go, or did you want me to? I don't mind.
I'm happy for you to go, if you like.
Yeah, so I guess with this one, it's really about, so with us, it's part of the training that we offer is really looking at building the confidence of staff and volunteers to just have these conversations and to try and challenge that kind of taboo around having open and honest conversations around LGBTQ. But I think the other thing is, and I don't have the answer for this yet, but Dr. Yiling mentioned finding ways to kind of tap into things such as religion. So Hinduism, for instance, and really looking at how gender and sexuality kind of operates within Hinduism, and what are the entry points to have conversations around that. So from my personal experience, when I came out, part of my family is Hindu, half of my family. My mum's family actually went back through the Bhagavad Gita and looked at the scriptures, and actually their way of coming to terms with my sexuality was to look at what the scriptures said and to actually de-center a Western approach to sexuality and to re-center a kind of religious approach in this case. And they found that was how they came to terms with my sexuality. So I think there's actually going to be many different ways of doing this. I also think there needs to be more research, which I love to hear, that's going on into how we actually conceptualize gender and sexuality in a non-Western framework, because that's going to be so important. So we look at the marriage equality debate, a lot of that rhetoric focused on Western concepts and really didn't look at the multicultural space. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to those narratives and discourse coming in.
Thanks, Tim. I'll just add on to that. I think that their religious beliefs are important and should always be respected. There are concerns about maintaining their cultural belief and having to work in an organization to support equity, justice. It's also really important to them. So being able to balance that must be difficult for them. And I think we can appreciate that kind of contradiction, tension, and conflict that they are experiencing. I think that what is really important for the organization is really to just keep reinforcing the message that your cultural beliefs, your religious beliefs are really important, and there's no way that we are attempting for you to change in any way. But then what is happening within the workspace is that we are extending the services to to queer community. That is how we will be, how we continue to maintain their professional standards and the caring standards, regardless of who our clients are. But I think that broader conversations around discrimination, homophobia, and also heteronormativity is really important to take place in the community forums, to also help all of us to have a better understanding of how how homophobia came about, or queerphobia came about. Why is it that why is it that such discrimination happened? Going back to some of the histories that we inherit is really important for us to see how that this straight world, or this very clear binary world of men, women, straight people are all a kind of legacy that we have inherited from the colonial system. I think that kind of understanding is very, very important for us, for all of us, without having to go into the actual religion, because it can be a very sensitive area, and also it is not fair to anyone who wants to continue to embrace their religious and cultural belief. I don't think we need to go into that, but rather to move away from that and to really talk about the history, the genealogy of how queerphobia, homophobia came about, and how heteronormativity came about. Why is it that this will assume people to be straight by default? Why is it that we would only see human bodies as in binary terms, that there's only men and women? If we can increase our knowledge and conversation around this, we will then be able to see and able to appreciate some of this cultural diversity in genders, sex, and sexuality. I think we will be able to celebrate our own cultural heritage as well, to look at how some of our cultural heritage really do embrace multiple gender, sex, and sexuality, and that is, I think, that could be something that we can go into. Yeah. But that is exactly what the broader study is interested to investigate and to keep, to bring forward that message, or that work of, advocacy and education.
Yeah, we probably our next research project, Elaine. Yeah. And I think on the other hand, we also really support human rights. We believe it's individual right to choose their own gender or sexuality preference, so we're really supporting them. I got another chat that some other people are interested in the working group. Yep, I'm going to contact. Webmate Council. Well done. So we will contact you definitely today. Good. And any of you interested to do any partnership with us, or get more feedback about what we can do, or any project, just contact us. Anyone from the organization, we really love to work with you. The only one thing I would like to clarify with in Tim's presentation, that he talked about, we have 81 staff who get training. Actually, the 81 is not only ADS staff, that we actually offer to staff from all other settlement organizations, including Migrant Resource Center. So we hope that other organizations who work with the poor LGBTI community also get trained. And it's part of what we try to raise some awareness of the need with our MRC Alliance. Anyone else? You got any question? Yep, Tim.
Thought I'd build on what you're saying, Dr. Ealing. Also, that there needs to be more of a focus within LGBTQ communities and organizations around multicultural work. So often I work across both spaces now, and there's a lack of LGBTQ within the multicultural space, but there's also a lack of multicultural within the LGBTQ space. And we really see that across representation in all LGBTQ organizations. And that's a shift I'm hoping happens over time, but it's very noticeable how that operates, and that a lot of the language that we have to talk about this is very Western and white-centered because of that lack of diversity within our own organizations. And it's hopefully going to shift. But yeah, I even noticed with there is the upcoming FECA conference, like there's nothing to do with LGBTQ there. And even around a lot of our work, there's a lack of multicultural. I'd love to know both of your thoughts on that. Have you noticed that, or?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that there's not enough overlap there, and that if we look at the genealogy of queer organizations, right, this definitely from very Western centric, and there's a lot of emphasis on certain identifications. Even I mean, the use of pronoun is great. I think that's important. I use that in my classroom as well. But for certain language group, pronouns are not even gendered. Doesn't even matter to them. So it's these things, and also how in certain cultural groups, we also assume that that there will be discrimination, but in fact there is celebration of diversity of bodies and diversities of genders and sexuality. So I think that that's just because there has not been an overlap. So a lot of assumptions have been made about multicultural organizations. There's also a lot of assumptions that have been made about multicultural queer people. There's also a lot of assumptions that have been made about queer organizations. So I think that coming together will really help to have a more intersectional approach towards delivering services and providing more multicultural and queer specific kind of services for different groups of people in different contexts, and also to not put them in and do not use a singular lens to look at them, because even among multicultural queer people, we are also looking at different class groups. Refugees do not have the same kind of issues, and I mean have a lot more challenges and issues and struggles as compared to a middle class, queer migrant who are in a more comfortable position. So again, these are very broad, but really important and very pressing issue that we need to look at, especially in the current context of the global pandemic recovery. At this point, I also want to introduce my collaborator, Dr. Shauna Tang from University of Sydney, who will also collaborate with me to work on this broader study with ADS and with other multicultural queer organizations that I haven't had a chance to organize a meeting with Antoinette and Anthony for you to meet my collaborator, Dr. Tang. So she's also here in our midst. Just want to make a quick introduction here.
Okay, I'm just going to say a quick hello, and I'm so glad to be here this morning. Very encouraged by all this very positive support and initiatives by ADS. and also very intrigued, right, by the problematic here. And I think one of the real tensions that I see here that's really interesting is this question of identity, right? I think so much of the advocacy work and the inclusion work pivots on the question of identity, right? One has to declare I'm gay before I can join an art class, or I think earlier, Eileen, you had a slide about how this client just wanted support for the child, but then have to declare sort of their sexual orientation and so on. So much of this is pivot around sexual identity, and that's to some extent understandable, because sexual identity as a construct itself came from the Western world, right? But if we sort of change sort of more basic conversations from questions of identity to questions of practices, right? What you were discussing, Eileen, right? Cultural practices, religious practices, right? If that sort of paradigm shifts around practices and practices you have observed within your own cultural groups, I think that might be one way to unlock, you know, this tension. And I'm hoping that this project that we move forward may address this very central question of sexual identity and having to use pronouns and so on, which are really inclusive practices, but at the same time as may not necessarily resonate with some members of the community. Yeah. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you all. Thanks for introducing me.
Good, Dr. Tang. Do we have any other questions before we ask Eileen to do the conclusion, the close-up? Just to let you know, the report actually on our website. After this event, we will be sending an email with a link to all you who attended to access to the final report. So I hand over to you, Eileen.
Okay, well, I don't have much to conclude except to say that that we are looking forward to work on the broader study which I've mentioned in my slides. That this broader study we are hoping to really focus, instead of just looking at the diversity service of workers, which I thought was a very, very important first step that we did with ADS, and rightfully so. Now we are really moving towards understanding the multicultural queer communities themselves in the context of global pandemic recovery, and also to appreciate the diversity of these groups, right? So we are going to look at primarily the multicultural and language groups that ADS is servicing, which is quite a wide range, including we have the Lebanese group, the Greek group, the Southeast Asians like Filipino, Vietnamese, as well as East Asians from China, from and India, Nepal as well. So it is a really wide range, and we are interested to really understand the different groups and their cultural practices and systems concerning gender, sex, and sexuality. So that's really the next step, and also including other multicultural queer groups and multicultural queer organizations in this study. So if you are interested to join us in this study, if you are a member of a multicultural queer organization, and you would like to be part of this study, please get in touch with us. We are definitely very interested to have other partners so that the scope of the study can be broader. So that's something that we plan to do, and we are in the progress of putting the proposal together and applying for the Australian Research Council grant this year. So that is the aim that's coming up. And I think overall, I just want to say that I'm really heartened to be part of this study, to be able to engage with community partners and to listen to their voices, to listen to the voices of the diversity service workers who are on the ground doing the work, having the interaction with them, and also just incredibly moved by their sincerity to extend their services and their compassion for the people that they serve, as queer migrant woman of color myself living in Australia, I was very heartened to know that when I need the service, I can go to ADS for elder care when I'm older. And I know that they will have maybe mental health support or settlement services for me as a queer migrant woman of color here. So I just feel really heartened, and I really hope that the study will raise the profile of excellent, compassionate, well-meaning organizations like ADS, and that more people will know that multicultural organizations like ADS is really keen to extend their services to multicultural queer people. So bravo to the team at ADS. They are just amazing people, and I'm so fortunate to have known them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and John and team. And we're looking forward to work with Dr. Ten. At ADA, we really want to continue to improve our services. We would like to work together, work with all you together to support the LGBT community, to ensure that they have equal access to services and stop discrimination against anyone, including LGBT community. Okay, thank you very much for all attending. Our email will send it to you after this event about the link of the report. Should you would like to get more information or have any partnership or any suggestions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.